Welcome to another deep dive, and today we're talking all about our senses.
Ooh, interesting.
Yeah, so we'll be going way beyond like the basic five senses that we all learned about back in, elementary school.
Right.
And we're using this really cool physiology handout by Dr. Rasha Eldeeb.
Okay.
And I think you're going to be really surprised to learn just how much your body is sensing all the time. It's
Hmm.
way more than you probably realize.
I bet. I mean, we always think about sight and hearing and all those,
Yeah.
the classic five.
Exactly. But there's so much more. It's like we're only just beginning to understand
Right.
this secret language our bodies are speaking. So how do we even begin to decode it? What else is going on beyond those familiar five senses?
Well, Dr. Eldeeb breaks down sensation into three main categories:
Okay.
somatic, visceral, and organic.
Okay.
Somatic sensations are kind of what we usually think about when we think about the senses. It's, feelings from your body itself.
Oh.
If someone gives you a hug,
Hmm.
or if you have that ache of a pulled muscle.
Okay, got it. Somatic sensations. What about visceral and organic?
Visceral sensations come from your internal organs.
Okay.
So think about that feeling of fullness after a really good meal.
Oh, yeah.
Or maybe the opposite of that. You know that uncomfortable feeling when you've had way too much candy or
Oh,
something.
yeah.
So it's not just about like the taste of the food, but it's those deeper sensations that are telling you.
Right.
My stomach is happy. Or maybe my stomach is sending me a warning signal.
Right, exactly. Exactly. So that's visceral. And then what about organic?
Organic sensations relate to your overall kind of state.
Okay.
Like that just bone-tired feeling after you've, been up all night.
No, yeah.
Or maybe the wave of thirst after a tough workout.
I see. So it's like our bodies are constantly giving us this feedback. We just need to know how to listen to it.
Yeah.
So speaking of important messages, let's talk about pain. Because it's fascinating to me that Dr. Eldeeb mentioned that the brain itself doesn't actually feel pain.
Yeah, that is really interesting. The brain process pain, of course,
Mm-hmm.
but it doesn't have the pain receptors that are found throughout the body.
Oh, interesting. So those receptors are called nociceptors, right?
Exactly, yeah.
So if the brain isn't actually feeling the pain directly, why do we experience it so intensely? What's the point of it?
Well, think of pain as your body's alarm system.
Okay.
The nociceptors are like little tripwires
Right.
that alert you to potential danger. So, when you touch a hot stove, you immediately pull your hand away. It's because those nociceptors are sending a signal screaming, hey, pull your hand away, this is bad news.
So pain is actually a good thing, even though it feels so terrible in the moment.
Yeah, exactly. It's like your body's way of protecting you.
Right, okay. And so are there different types of nociceptors?
Yeah, just like you have different levels of security, you've got different types of nociceptors. So some react to pressure,
Oh.
others react to like temperature extremes,
Mm-hmm.
and some are actually triggered by chemicals that are released when your body is injured.
Oh, wow. So what happens when those signals reach the brain?
Well, it gets really interesting because there's actually two types of pain: fast pain and slow pain.
Oh, I see. So fast pain is like that sharp, immediate ow-w
Exactly, yeah.
when you stub your toe or something.
Yeah, it travels on really fast nerve fibers, and it basically warns you to get away from whatever caused it.
That makes sense. What about slow pain?
So slow pain is carried on much slower nerve fibers. It's less about instant reaction and more about letting you know that there's damage that needs attention.
Mhm.
So think about a deep bruise, that kind of lingering ache.
Right.
That's your body telling you, hey, take it easy and let me heal.
So if you understand the difference, you can manage your pain better too.
Yeah,
If it's fast, get away from the danger. If it's slow, just rest.
exactly.
But sometimes it feels like the pain isn't even coming from the right place.
Right.
Dr. Eldeeb mentioned referred pain. What is that all about?
So referred pain is when you feel pain in a totally different spot from where the problem actually is.
Wow, that is so weird.
Yeah. A classic example is a heart attack. So the pain might be centered in your chest,
Right.
but it can radiate to your left arm or jaw.
So your arm could be totally fine,
Yeah.
but you feel pain there because something's going on with your heart. How does that even happen?
Yeah, it's wild. It all comes down to how the nerves from different parts of your body connect to your spinal cord.
Okay.
So imagine like two wires getting crossed.
Right.
The signal from your heart gets mixed up with the signal from your arm,
Okay.
and your brain gets confused.
Oh, wow. That's incredible. Like our bodies are playing tricks on us,
Right.
but at least we have a system for turning down the volume on that pain, right? Dr. Eldeeb mentioned the analgesia system.
Yeah, luckily, our brains have a really remarkable ability to modulate how we perceive pain.
Interesting.
And it's actually a system that's very similar to how morphine works.
Oh, wow.
It's like we have a built-in pharmacy of natural painkillers.
So it's not just blocking the pain signals, it's like the brain is actively reducing how intensely we feel those signals.
Exactly, yeah.
Wow. So how does it work?
So it uses our natural opioids like endorphins, enkephalins, and dynorphin,
Okay.
and those actually bind to receptors in the brain and the spinal cord.
Mm.
And it essentially tells those areas, hey, chill out.
Okay.
Don't overreact to the pain signals.
It's fascinating that our brains can fine-tune our experience of pain like that. It's not just like a one-way street from injury to agony.
Right, yeah.
Okay, now that we've explored the world of pain, I kind of want to turn to another sense that seems so straightforward, but it's actually really complex, and that is touch.
Yeah, definitely. Touch
Yeah.
is so much more than we give it credit for. It's not just one sense. It's really a whole team of specialized receptors working together to give us all this information about pressure and texture and temperature and even pain.
So it's like a whole high-tech sensor suit built right into our skin.
Exactly, yeah.
Wow. So what are some of the key players on this touch team?
Well, you've got free nerve endings,
Oh.
and those are kind of the multitasking workhorses. They can
Yes.
detect everything from a light brush to a painful poke.
Mm-hmm.
And then you have receptors that are specifically for hair movement.
Oh, interesting.
Those are very, very sensitive, so they pick up even the slightest breeze rustling through your hair.
Whoa, so it's like our hair follicles are like tiny little antennas
Yeah.
helping us sense the world around us.
Yeah.
I love that. Okay, so about the receptors that give us that really detailed sense of touch, like when you're feeling a fine fabric or reading Braille.
Those are the Meissner's corpuscles.
Okay.
They're packed into areas like your fingertips,
Mm-hmm.
and that gives you that really exquisite sensitivity. And then there's also Merkel's discs, and those are more about sustained pressure and texture, so they help you distinguish between a smooth surface and a rough surface.
Wow. So each receptor has its own specialty, and together it's this whole symphony of sensations.
Yeah.
But there's also a difference between knowing something's touching you and really feeling the details, right? Dr. Eldeeb mentioned crude touch versus fine touch.
That's a really great point, yeah. So crude touch is kind of like that basic awareness that something's in contact with your skin.
Okay.
So your clothes, for example,
Mm.
or the feeling of sitting in a chair.
Yeah.
It's not super detailed,
Right.
but it gives you a general sense of your surroundings.
So it's like having a motion sensor.
Yeah, exactly.
Just lets you know something's there.
Yep.
Then fine touch is like upgrading to high definition, right?
Exactly, yeah. Fine touch is all about those details.
Yeah.
Precise location, subtle textures, the ability to distinguish between 2 points touching your skin.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why your fingertips are so much more sensitive than, say, your back.
Mm-hmm.
They're just packed with those specialized receptors for fine touch.
Right. So the more receptors, the finer the resolution.
Yeah.
Wow. It's incredible how our bodies are just so good at giving us exactly the information that we need. All right, so let's move on to another sense that's all about those details. Taste. What makes taste so fascinating to you?
Well, what's really cool about taste is that it's not just about those basic tastes,
Mm.
sweet, sour, salty, bitter, and umami.
Right.
It's a whole world of subtle flavors that we perceive based on this complex chemistry of what we're eating.
Mm-hmm.
It's a combination of all those basic receptors working together, but also things like smell and texture to create this whole symphony of flavor.
Oh, wow. It's really fascinating. So it's not just those 5 basic receptors.
No.
It's them working together.
Yeah, it's like a team effort.
And plus other factors
Hmm.
to create this whole
Yeah.
experience. Wow. And I also read that there might even be more
Yeah.
than those basic 5.
There's research that suggests that we might even have taste receptors for things like fat,
Oh, wow.
calcium, and even water, which kind of explains why we find those things appealing.
Yeah, it's incredible. It's like a whole chemistry lab
It
happening in our mouths every time we eat. Okay, and speaking of chemistry, let's talk about smell. There's this myth that humans have a weak sense of smell compared to, other animals.
Right.
Is there any truth to that?
Well, it's true that dogs and some other animals have a much more sensitive sense of smell.
Right.
But don't underestimate the power of the human nose.
Mm.
Our sense of smell is still incredibly important, not just for enjoying food, but for so much more.
Yeah, and I know that certain smells can trigger really strong memories, like the scent of freshly baked cookies. It takes me right back to my childhood kitchen.
Totally. There's a really strong connection between smell and memory. So the olfactory bulb, the part of your brain that processes smells, is actually directly linked to areas involved in memory and emotion.
Oh, wow.
So that's why certain scents can just instantly evoke vivid memories,
Right.
powerful feelings. It's like a direct line to your emotional memory bank.
So it's way more than just identifying like pleasant or unpleasant odors. It's actually deeply tied to our experiences, how we remember them. So how does our sense of smell actually work, like on a physical level?
So it's all about those incredible chemorcheme juices, again, just like with taste.
Okay.
But instead of being on your tongue, these are located high up in your nasal cavity. So when you breathe in, odor molecules bind to those receptors, sending signals to your brain.
So do we have like a specific receptor for every possible smell out there?
It's not quite like a one-to-one mapping, but we do have a huge variety of those odor receptors.
Okay.
And each one is tuned to a specific type of molecule.
Okay.
And the combination of those receptors that are being activated,
Right.
that's what allows us to perceive such a vast range of smells.
So it's like having a massive palette of scent colors that our brains are just constantly mixing and matching
Yeah, it's pretty amazing.
to create every possible olfactory experience. This is mind-blowing. But let's kind of zoom out a little bit now
Okay.
and talk about how all of these senses come together. Because Dr. Eldeeb mentioned, just briefly, sensory integration. What is that exactly?
So sensory integration is how our brains take all of the information that's coming in from our different senses
Right.
and weave it together to create a complete picture of the world. So it's not just about seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, and touching individually.
Right.
It's about how our brains combine all of those senses into a unified experience.
So it's like our senses are all individual instruments, and then our brain is the conductor, orchestrating this beautiful symphony of perception.
That's a great analogy.
Yeah.
And our brains are doing this all the time without us even having to think about it. It's pretty remarkable when you think about it.
It really is. Can you give us an example of how that works in everyday life?
Yeah. So imagine you're walking through a forest. Your eyes are taking in the lush greenery, the dappled sunlight coming through the trees,
Right.
movement of the birds, maybe. But at the same time, you're hearing the rustling leaves, the chirping birds,
Yeah.
maybe the crunching of twigs under your feet.
Mhm.
And you might even smell the damp earth and the scent of pine needles. And so your brain takes all those individual sensory inputs and weaves them together into this complete experience of being in the forest.
So what happens when that process doesn't work smoothly?
When sensory integration is disrupted, it can lead to a range of challenges,
Oh,
from difficulty processing sensory information to problems with coordination and balance, and even social interaction.
wow.
Sensory overload is a really common example of this.
Oh, yeah. Sensory overload. That's that feeling of being overwhelmed by too much sensory input
Yeah.
all at once. And I think it can be really common, especially in our world now.
Yeah, absolutely.
There's so much stimulation all the time.
Yeah, our modern world is very stimulating. So, think about a time when you've been in a really crowded, noisy place, maybe a concert or a busy shopping mall.
Right.
All those sights, sounds, smells coming at you at once can be overwhelming.
It can be too much. Like my brain just feels like it short circuits.
Yeah, and it manifests differently for different people. Some people might feel anxious or irritable, others might have trouble concentrating, and some might even experience physical symptoms, like headaches or dizziness.
Like everyone has their own sensory comfort zone.
Yeah,
And when you're pushed outside of that, it can trigger a whole range of reactions.
exactly. It really is. And so what can we do to, kind of navigate those situations and manage sensory overload?
Yeah. Are there any strategies that you recommend?
Well, the first step is just awareness,
Okay.
recognizing what your own personal triggers are,
Right.
and just knowing what types of environments tend to be overwhelming for you.
Okay.
And once you know that, you can start to create strategies for managing those situations.
So it's all about being proactive and like taking charge of your own sensory experience.
Exactly, yeah.
Right.
So if you know that a certain type of place is going to be overwhelming for you, maybe you plan a shorter visit.
Right.
Or, you find a quiet corner where you can take a break if you need to.
Mm.
Or if you're someone who's really sensitive to loud noises, maybe you bring noise-canceling headphones
Right.
just to help kind of filter out some of that input.
So it's not about avoiding these situations altogether. It's just about having tools
Right.
to help you navigate them more comfortably.
Yeah, exactly.
Mhm.
And sometimes it's the little things that can make a big difference. So like focusing on one sense at a time.
Okay.
So maybe paying attention to your breath,
Right.
feeling your feet grounded on the floor,
Okay.
or finding something visually soothing to look at.
I see.
So all of those things can kind of help to ground you,
Okay.
bring you back to a sense of calm.
Like give your brain a little break
Yeah,
from all of the chaos. I've also heard that fidget toys can be really helpful for sensory overload. Is there any truth to that?
absolutely, yeah. Fidget toys can be a really great outlet for nervous energy.
Okay.
And giving yourself something tactile to focus on can actually help calm your nervous system,
Mm-hmm.
reduce those feelings of overwhelm.
So it's not just a distraction, it's actually like serving a purpose,
Exactly, yeah.
providing sensory input that's calming and regulating.
Yeah, it's about finding what works for you. Everyone's different.
Right. Yeah.
But the key is to kind of experiment and find the strategies that help you manage sensory overload and just feel more comfortable.
I love that. This has been so eye-opening. I feel like I'm seeing the world and even my own body in a whole new way.
Yeah.
Before we wrap up, I do want to touch on a couple of other senses that Dr. Eldeeb mentioned.
Okay.
Kinesthesia and the vestibular sense. What are those all about?
So kinesthesia is all about movement. It's that sense that tells you where your body is in space as you move.
Okay.
So think about a dancer or an athlete.
Right.
Their incredible coordination and grace,
Mm-hmm.
that's largely thanks to a finely tuned sense of kinesthesia.
So it's not just seeing where your limbs are, but like feeling
Yeah,
the subtle movements and adjustments your body is making as you move through space?
exactly. It's this constant feedback loop between your muscles and joints and your brain
Okay.
that allows you to move so fluidly and effortlessly.
That is fascinating.
Hmm.
What about the vestibular sense? What role does that play in our sensory orchestra?
So the vestibular sense is all about balance and spatial orientation.
Okay.
So it's what tells you which way is up, and it helps you maintain your balance as you move through the world.
Okay.
And it actually relies on a pretty complex system
Hmm.
of fluid-filled canals and tiny hair cells in your inner ear.
So it's not just our ears hearing sounds,
Right.
but they're also playing this crucial role in our sense of balance,
Exactly.
how we navigate our surroundings.
The vestibular system is constantly detecting changes in your head, position, and movement, sending signals to your brain to keep you upright and stable.
Wow. So think about like riding a roller coaster,
Yeah.
all those twists and turns and drops.
Your vestibular system is working overtime.
To keep you oriented and prevent you from getting like completely disoriented.
Exactly, yeah.
Wow. It's incredible to think about how all of these senses are working together, often behind the scenes, to just allow us to move through the world.
It really is. And, we've only just scratched the surface here.
Yeah,
There's
yeah.
still so much we don't know about the human senses,
Yeah.
but that's what makes it so exciting to explore.
Well, this deep dive has been a truly fascinating journey into the incredible world of our senses.
It has been.
We've learned how much more our bodies are sensing than we often realize, and just how these senses are constantly shaping our experience of the world. So thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the incredible world of your senses. We encourage you to keep exploring, keep paying attention to those subtle sensations, and keep marveling at the wonders of your own perception. Until next time.
It really is a delicate balancing act. Our brains are constantly trying to, make sense of all this incoming information. And sometimes it can be just too much.
Yeah, and when that balance is thrown off, it's like that's when you experience the sensory overload, right?
Right. Yeah, exactly. Think about, have you ever been in a really crowded, noisy place?
Oh, yeah.
Maybe a concert or a busy shopping mall? All those sights and sounds and smells, it can
Yeah.
just be whoosh, too much.
Yeah, it's too much. It's like my brain just feels like it's short-circuiting, and it's not that any one sense is necessarily bad.
Right.
It's just the sheer volume of input.
Yeah. It's just too much to process.
Yeah.
And it can be, different for different people how it manifests.
Yeah.
Some people might feel really anxious or irritable.
Mhm.
Other people might have trouble concentrating.
Yeah.
And some people even experience physical symptoms like headaches or dizziness.
It's like everyone has their own sensory comfort zone, and when you get pushed outside of that, it can trigger all these reactions.
Exactly.
So what can we do to kind of navigate those situations,
Mm.
manage that sensory overload? Do you have any strategies you recommend?
Absolutely. I think the first step is just awareness,
Okay.
recognizing your own personal triggers.
Right.
What types of environments tend to be overwhelming for you?
Right. Okay.
And once you kind of have that awareness,
Yeah.
you can start to create strategies.
So it's about being proactive and taking charge of
Exactly.
your own experience.
So, if you know that a certain type of place is going to be really overwhelming for you, maybe you plan a shorter visit
Right.
Or you find a quiet corner where you can take a break.
Right.
Or if you're someone who's really sensitive to loud noises, maybe you bring noise-canceling headphones
Right.
to just help filter out some of that input.
So it's not about avoiding it altogether,
Right.
but just having those tools
Exactly, yeah.
to navigate it better.
And sometimes it's the little things that can make a big difference.
Mm-hmm.
Like focusing on one sense at a time.
Okay.
So maybe paying attention to your breath,
Okay.
feeling your feet grounded on the floor,
Mm-hmm.
or maybe finding something visually soothing to look at. And all those little things can really kind of help ground you and bring you back to a sense of calm.
Right, like give your brain a little break.
Yeah.
Reset. Okay. Well, this has been such a fascinating conversation. I feel like I'm seeing the world
Yeah.
and even my own body in a whole new way.
It's amazing, isn't it?
Yeah. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the incredible world of your senses. We encourage you to keep exploring, keep paying attention to those subtle sensations, and keep marveling at the wonders of your own perception. Until next time.